what do we do about this?
So as long as that area doesn't exceed 4 psi, we have a waterproofing, a clear waterproofing for the floor, for the slab. But then we also recommend using our fast plug, our hydraulic cement, for that area where the slab meets the wall.
And how do you have to grind that out? Can you just put that in?
Yeah, you know, in most cases you can grind out, back it out 1/4 inch or 3/8, and then fill that with the hydraulic cement. That comes in powder form. You mix it with water. And you
have to work fast. I think you'd agree.
Work extremely fast, but it will. Again, it all depends on the severity. Mike's right about channeling out situations where the pressure is just too high. But we are clear for the floors. We make at a 4 psi because we know the slab will break above that. But
so you don't mean the slab will break. You mean that the coating will stick to pieces of concrete, right, and spall off?
We initially made that product to withstand more psi than that. But what we found was the concrete slab would crack. A weak point would crack, and so 4 psi will control most of what we've seen. If it's more severe than that, then you have to do what Mike is talking about. But in most cases, the hydraulic cement along the edge works, and using the clear on the floor.
How would we measure if we have a 4 psi difference? In other words, if I've got water coming in my basement, and I know that if it's less than 4 psi, like you say, that these products would work, but I wouldn't know how to know if I've got more or less than 4 psi. Is there any kind of like a quick and easy way of determining that?
Honestly, Mike, I don't know. I've not seen where there's a situation where the floor and wall, the clear, doesn't work. I've not witnessed anything above that 4 psi. From what I understand, from what the labs tell us, is that the slab itself, the pressure, the weak point of the slab, there will be a weak point found, and it will crack both, somewhere north of 4 psi. And so we didn't want to seal a slab and it withstand higher than that, and then we cause slabs to crack.
And I've seen like moisture or water evidence through efflorescence, and it's hard to know, maybe I'm wrong, if it's liquid water or vapor movement. I'm not sure that vapor leaves behind the trail of efflorescence that I see in my basement, but what do we do about that, gentlemen? Like, how do I fix that? I'm not going to dig up my foundation wall on the outside, right? So are there things I can do to slow that water from getting in my basement?
I know you can clean it off and then you can seal it. I mean, that's what we've done when we've done finished basements in the past, and how I kind of became familiar with the UGL product of dry lock was basically you dry it. Usually we would just use indoor dehumidifiers and fans running a couple days to lower that ambient humidity to where there wasn't actually moisture in the wall. And then frequently we were dealing with more mold issues than efflorescence, but we would do % bleach mixture and clean everything off before we started drying it so that it was scrubbed clean and ready to accept paint. Then we would dry the area over a couple of days, and then we would roll on the dry lock. In fact, I'm coming to you live from my basement in Prairie in the city, built before 1950, but this basement has CMU wall foundation, or excuse me, foundation wall. And I did this process here because we have 3 leaky corners. And then I followed it up with Andy Engel wrote an article for FHB years ago about a dry basement system that basically involved laying up sheets of foam on the walls and then building it up as well on the floor, and then doing a floating floor above that. And the floor already had a drain, so any water that's getting in, I don't know about it because it's traveling below that membrane and out to the drain. But I have an unfinished portion of my basement, my shop and my laundry facility, and we've got white dry lock on that I put up 15 years ago that has held all of my front drainage at bay. Basically those shortcomings when I don't stay on top of the gutters.
Yeah.
We still have occasional infiltration at other locations that I can access. And this front side of the house is held up just fine where it's exposed. An old drip trail across the floor to the drain. So I know it's coming in somewhere, but I have a mold allergy. So this would not be a good place for me to hang out if it wasn't working as planned. So that's been our solution. And after having success at my personal home, I felt confident doing it on basement after basement after basement. I bet we've done 20 or 30 just in this market over the last decade.
It doesn't cost a lot, right?
Rolling up gallons. My friend Isaac, who works for Watson Construction locally, he does it as part of his standard practice too. And he's constantly telling me how efficient, because you're able to move forward with your project the next day. So if you compare slot cutting the perimeter, installing a curtain drain, like all these other alternatives that are a means to, mitigate that risk versus loading up your paint tray and going to town after one day of prep and cleaning, he's framing day 3 and off to the races. So it's a very effective solution for us.
Mike, Travis, Lance, so one of the things that happens in basements is you get shrinkage cracks in foundation walls or concrete slabs in the floor. Like, are there any reliable solutions to prevent water from coming in those cracks when we have high water table events or, weird groundwater movement?
Epoxy.
What's that?
We've always had to do epoxy injection. If we actually have cracks that are letting water in vertically, we've always had to drill them out and inject epoxy to solve that. But shrinkage cracks are much smaller. You were going to say, Lance?
I was just going to say a shrinkage crack is much smaller, and it could be ground out too to maybe 1/8 of an inch. And again, the fast plug, the hydraulic cement works really well. I've actually used it on water coming in and literally stopped it.
I've heard of that. What the heck is hydraulic cement chemically? What is going on there?
I can tell you this: when you mix a little bit of water with this powder, it heats up. You don't want to be holding it. I do these demonstrations with a lot of the hardware younger crowd. I'll mix up a little bit in a cup and I'll dump it out onto the table, onto a paper towel. And within about 3 minutes, it's rock hard. And so I'll reach down and grab it and toss it to somebody in the front row. And they're always surprised, because it's set up. But it heats up and expands and becomes part of that substrate, and it stops the water.
Well, you said it's expansion, Mike.
Yeah, it does expand. And I've used it to fill the joint between soil pipes or drain pipes that go out through the concrete wall.
Because it's never a tight fit, right? The plumber is always drilling the hole oversized, or that contractor, the concrete guy.
Yeah, so we'll hollow that out and we'll inject the hydraulic cement in there, and then we'll, hold it back till it cures. And that's just, I've done them in many houses where the leak was persistent year after year, and only after we chiseled it out, created a keyway inside the foundation or in the concrete wall of the block, and then filled it, and then it just stopped. So it does work great.
I'm going to tell you, I mentioned the basement water infiltration episode where I woke up and stepped in a 1/2 inch of water and was walking through the same water to go to the bathroom before I could turn on the lights and figure out what the heck was going on. So my solution to this was to completely excavate the outside of my home and completely backfill with gravel, installing a new footing drain. And obviously that's not practical in every solution, but I mean, was I lucky that I never had another incident? Was it just randomness, or did that actually help the situation? Because it seems unlikely that I excavated all the way to the very bottom of the footing to put the drain. I kind of feel like I stopped at the top of the footing. So was I just lucky, or was that increased capillary space in the gravel versus clayey soil? Would that help?
Every house is an experiment, and everything you do to a house is an experiment. And the only way you're going to know is to set up a control. So unless you want to set up a control, you can't answer that question.
And my house was little. It wasn't that much gravel, you know, it was, you know, a couple truckloads, but it was a lot of work, as you might imagine. And that's not a practical solution for most people.
Yeah, but you got to rent a machine and play with it.
Oh, I got a couple. Like I got to rent an excavator and a skid steer loader. Oh, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I was in my 20s, so I didn't care.
Unless you're solving for groundwater, you know, spring fed and below, like Mike's dealing with his high water table events, you really are solving most of your, in our experience, you're solving most of your problems in the top few inches, not even the top few feet. So the fact that you dug at all means you made a significant improvement in managing all surface water coming toward your home. And then when you think about, you know, water moving across the top of the rock, the water table that we're dealing with, as long as your home is inches above that water table, you really should never have any infiltration as a result of it in what we've experienced.
What's your soil type like, Travis? Is it gravel, sandy, or is it clay?
We have a lot of fatty clays here. We have a lot of very successful peering companies that work in our neck of the woods.
Because of failed foundations?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Our neighborhood was built, as I said, in the 50s with concrete masonry units. So the so-called cinder block foundation walls are throughout my community, and they're just not good at resisting soil pressures laterally. So those fatty clays get moisture, they swell up, and all of a sudden you've got a 3-inch bow in the middle of that wall